Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Mavidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, may the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace. Peace and beneficence be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. Hari Om Tat Sat. Beloved, make it so. Well, I have the news that another of our long-time leaders, he served many years ago now and has been doing something else for many years, about 33 years. But he was one of the very early leaders of this place and remained very loyal to it. His name was John Cassock, and he passed away on the morning of September 8th. So we'll be getting out a bulletin this afternoon about John Cassock and his participation and some recollections by people who knew him. He was a remarkable man in very many ways. And during the early days of this work here in Atlanta, the Swamis, Atmavratananda, Anamananda, Atmarupananda, and Yogeshananda, they were being sent out from Chicago, but then they would be called back. During the times that they were called back, John Cassock kept the work going by leading classes at the place where they held classes, which was a place called the Padea School over in Decatur. And so John kept this place going and was a leader of this group for quite a while until Yogeshananda finally came back and established a regular, he just said that he was going to stay, and did. And that was the beginning of what is now your Vedanta Center of Atlanta. But there's a real strong case that can be made that if John Cassock had not done what he did, while the Swamis were not present here, it would not have sustained. People would have found something else to do. So I'm going to ask for a moment of silence for John Cassock, who is survived by his wife, Diana, their son, Eric, and she also had a son that John adopted from a previous marriage. Diana did. So for those of you who are interested, you can read the bulletin that comes out later today, or if you don't get the bulletin, our newsletter, you can find it on the website or Facebook. So John Cassock passed away on the morning of September 8th. A moment of silence. So all of you, thank you for coming this morning to our class on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, as translated by and commented on by Swami Prabhavananda. Prabhavananda knew Sanskrit extremely well, and so it's interesting that his translations are looked to by many scholars who are not as accomplished in Sanskrit as the Swami was, to see what he actually, whether Patanjali or Krishna or whoever it was being translated, what they actually said. And of course, Prabhavananda had the help of Christopher Isherwood to put this into the finest English. Isherwood was a very successful novelist and short story writer. So we're talking about what Patanjali says about the lower form of samadhi, which he speaks of as nirvichara samadhi, the samadhi with seeds. Patanjali tells us that in the state of nirvichara samadhi, the mind becomes pure and filled with truth. This is another word for this kind of samadhi is savikalpa samadhi. It's an experience. It's an experience of the mind and soul that you are having. And what it means when it says that your mind becomes pure and filled with truth is that it is such an overwhelming experience that everything else seems very, it's put in its place. It isn't that it becomes unimportant. It simply becomes purified in your sense of it. You see it for what it is and are able to deal with it more practically and usefully in your life. But that memory of this state of nirvichara or savikalpa samadhi leaves you transformed. That's what's meant by the mind becomes pure and filled with truth. The mind is said to be pure because in this state, all the minor thought waves have been swallowed up by one great wave of concentration upon a single object. Whatever the object of your spiritual concentration was, that becomes all that is in that moment, and you see yourself as a part of that. It is true that seeds of attachment still exist within this wave, but only in a state of suspended animation. Suspended animation, they're dormant. If you think about the science fiction films you've seen, people are put in a state of suspended animation for long space journeys, so that they don't have to be sustained as living beings, fed and cared for. All those things that go along with being a human being, they're put in suspended animation. They're dormant. That's what's meant by suspended animation. For the moment, at least, they can do no harm. And it is very improbable, the Swami says, that they will ever become fertile again. Because having progressed this far, it is comparatively easy to take the final step, which will cause their annihilation. So, in that dormant state, you don't water them with your attention. Your attention continues to be focused on that which you experienced in nirvichara samadhi, this one great wave. That really is what is holding your attention now. And everything else is seen within the context of that experience. And so that's why the Swami says it's comparatively easy to take the final step, which will cause annihilation. It's said that in the final samadhi, these seeds become burnt to ash. In other words, they're not dormant anymore. They simply are burnt like burned in a fire. Fire and burned in the fire of Brahman or Atman. So before we go on, are there any comments from your own wisdom or experience, or any concern or question that any of this raises?
Hari Om Shankaraji.
Yes, Hari Om Bala.
The important thing is, as Swami was saying right at the beginning, this superconscious experience, like samadhi, is much better when compared to the reasoning and knowledge obtained by study.
Oh, yes. There's no comparison whatsoever.
Yes.
You simply see the left mind for what it is, and all of the study. It isn't that that's not important. It's all preparatory. It's all, you simply are not going to experience nirvichara samadhi until you develop the faith and belief in what you're doing that comes through your study. All of that, this study of the scriptures, the studies of the teachings of the great ones, and their incarnations and others, it's through this that you develop faith and belief. And so it sustains your practice. But once you have this samadhi experience, all of that seems much less in comparison, because it is now not something you've heard of. It's something you have directly experienced. It is empirical knowledge for you, not inferential knowledge. Thank you, Bala. That's a very important point. Anything else from anyone? Okay. It is comparatively easy to take the final step, which will cause the annihilation of these seeds of attachment. The mind in nirvichara samadhi is said to be filled with truth because it now experiences direct supersensory knowledge. Those who have meditated on some chosen ideal or spiritual personality experience direct contact with that personality, no longer as something subjectively imagined, but as something objectively known. If you have been meditating on Krishna, or upon Christ, or on Ramakrishna, after and trying to picture any one of them to yourself in your meditation, you will find that your picture dissolves into the reality of a living presence. And that's what Swami Prabhupada says in his first instruction. Feel that living presence, his first instruction for meditation. And in knowing that presence, you will see that your picture of it was imperfect and unlike the living original. Those who have had this experience liken it to the action of a magnet. They liken it to the action of a magnet. In the preliminary stages of meditation, the effort seems to come entirely from yourself. You keep focusing your mind to remain pointed, at its object. But now you become aware of an outside force, a magnetic power of attraction, which draws your mind in that desired direction so that the effort is no longer your own. And this is exactly what Patanjali says. You practice the first 6 limbs of self-effort, and they're something that you do. Once you've achieved this lower samadhi, are very close to it, you find that something happens to you. And this is what the Swami is describing here. That now you become aware of this power that is drawing you. It is no longer your own. This is what is known as grace. Yes, it is indeed grace. Because it's not something that no matter how hard you try, you cannot generate that kind of grace. You can generate a graceful relationship and attitude toward other human beings. You can generate your own kind of, and other living beings of all kinds. But you will not be able to generate this supersensory grace. How can we be sure that the revelations obtained through samadhi are genuine revelations and not some form of self-delusion or auto-hypnosis? How can we discern this? Common sense suggests several tests. For instance, it is obvious that the knowledge so obtained must not contradict the knowledge which has already been obtained by others. There are many knowers, but there is only one truth. Truth is one, sages call it by many names. Why do they call it by many names? Because each of us is unique. And it's actually quite practical and congenial to come up with your own version of it. If you want to know what I'm talking about, read Rabia in the first section of the book, How to Know, of the book Love Poems from God, where she talks about how using other names was instrumental and okay, but it didn't achieve the result that she achieved or was achieved for her when she began to have her own name for this truth, this beloved. Again, it is clear that this knowledge must be of something which is unknowable by other means. Unknowable, that is to say, by our ordinary sense experience. In other words, that those aspects of the left mind that are associated with our sensory perceptions. It's simply not available to those. We can hear about them, but we can't know them. And finally, this revelation must bring with it a complete renewal of the mind and transformation of character. And that is, in fact, what happens. So now, having said all that, is there anything you'd like to offer from your own experience about this? about how you've had this kind of experience yourself. You know the truth of what the Swami is saying because you've experienced it yourself. Or any concern that this raises, any doubt or concern of your left mind, or any question that you might want to ask about what this is, how it is achieved, so on.
Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
I feel for myself that I would probably like to go more from the knowing to the feeling. The feeling is something like it ignites the need to know, but to really get to the next step, I feel like the feel the living presence, the heart has to get in there more. And any uh, advice on that?
Well, yes, that's exactly what the Swami says. Uh, that's his first instruction for meditation. But he prefaces it by something very important, and that is the chosen ideal, that which you are meditating on, that which you are directing your attention toward in this one pointed way. The chosen ideal is you yourself, no different. The chosen ideal is you yourself, no different. Learn to feel that living presence. Now, what does he mean by it is you yourself, no different? It is the same thing that Uddalaka was saying to his son Svetaketu when he gives this long explanation about how Brahman came to create universe. And he said, and he ends his conversation and his explanation to Svetaketu by saying, and that, my son, thou art. That thou art. And this is what is realized even in this nirvichara or savikalpa samadhi, that there is only that and you are a part of it. There's no way for the partness it isn't that you're apart from it. You are a part of it. You know this, you see this, you feel this, but it isn't the full experience. But that's the final step that the Swami is talking about. And there's no way of talking about that because the talker, that is to say, the mind, is left behind. As Adi Shankaracharya said, my mind fell into the ocean of consciousness and therein dissolved. There was no mind left to think about what was happening, to experience it in the sense of an experience of, I am experiencing this. But you're right, dear, it is that feeling, that complete, convicted, empirical knowledge that, yes, I am that. So yes, you're absolutely right, Swayam. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Shankara.
Anything else from anyone about any of this?
Hari Om Shankaraji, couple of things. What the Swami is talking about, you can feel this, and it doesn't contradict the knowledge. This is exactly what Swami Vivekananda used to say. One of the things you have to follow is Aptavakya. That is the sentence by the realized soul.
Yes.
That is, and the second thing, I'm just thinking, the transformation of the character. That I don't think you need the samadhi for transformation of the character. Even bhakti, and this is what Sridharananda used to say, recognize every action. That itself brings the transformation in the mind. I think this is what I think.
Yes, but that is slowly and slowly. That happens little by little as we discriminate and renounce or release. That is absolutely right, Bala. The transformation of the character happens through bhakti, through karma, through jnana, through discrimination and release or renunciation. But when you have this experience of nirvichara or savikalpa samadhi, the transformation of character happens spontaneously and thoroughly because everything else is now put in its place. The seeds of attachment and desire, as is said, become dormant. It isn't as if they completely go away. And if, because of some predisposition of your prarabdha karma, that which brought you into this life, you continue to water them slightly with your attention, they will remain alive in you. They will. But at a far less degree. And you see it for what it is. And again, it's put in its place. So thank you, Bala. You're right on both points. The prarabdha karma, the karma that brought us into this particular lifetime, is very powerful. It's made of the three gunas in their Mahamaya form. It's powerful enough to have brought us back to what we know will be pain and suffering. We know this before we are born. Our subtle body knows, but there is still this strong desire for something. And that is what remains to be transformed. So don't think ill of yourself. Don't think, oh, there's something wrong with me because of this. No. It's perfectly natural and normal. And as Sri Ramakrishna says, everything happens at the right time, my dear. Everything happens at the right time. Speaking to his devotees there at Dakshineshwar in his room, he would tell them this. Don't be impatient. Don't try to rush things. Everything will happen at the right time.
Brother Shankara?
Yes, dear.
I have a question again, back to the basics, so to speak, between tendencies, habits, and impressions. My understanding is that a tendency towards something leads to habit, and then habit then leaves an impression, and it's the impression that goes with the subtle body. Can
Yes.
you lead me through with an example between the three?
Well, yes. When I came into this lifetime, I'll just use my own self as an example because it's so easy and so credible. When I came into this lifetime, I was particularly fond of food. I really had a great love of food. So I tended, even as a child, to be plump. And as an adult, this love of food and its its self-medicating uh, tendency to make me feel better when I didn't feel good, feel uneasy, anxious, so on. It led to the point where I finally weighed 286 pounds. So this tendency toward liking of food and became this strong habit of overeating. And I finally weighed 286 pounds. I now weigh 168 pounds. The reason being that this, over time, spiritual practice lessened the hold of that samskara, that mental impression, that habit on me. And finally, the change of character that comes with this spiritual practice led to a whole different attitude about food. But as is pointed out by the Swami, it isn't something that you do. It's something that happens spontaneously. The attitude toward food here is now very different, just totally different. It's no longer a form of self-medication. So does that explain it, Swayam?
Almost. So the impression that your subtle body came with was that food leads to um,
Happiness,
decrease of the happiness.
a kind of happiness, yes, it's a kind of self-medication. When you have that tendency to overeat, some people use other forms of self-medication. We all use some form of self-medication in the beginning before we start these spiritual practices, because we are trying to ease the pain. Isn't it so? I mean, all of us find some way. Some of them are even more self-destructive than overeating. But overeating over all those years led to, in 2015, me having an open heart surgery where they replaced 4 of the arteries of my heart. I mean, that was the penalty, the karmic penalty paid for all those years of overeating. My right carotid artery was almost totally blocked, and my heart had 4 blocked arteries. And so that, yes, it is. We've when people come into this life and become an alcoholic, for example, they are using alcohol as a form of self-medication to ease the pain of the bondage of self, as they say in Alcoholics Anonymous. Oh, higher power, relieve me of the bondage of self, which is exactly what we're talking about here in this sutra, being relieved of the bondage of that lower self and its attachments, habits, desires, and the transformation of character that takes place. And that's exactly what they talk about in Alcoholics Anonymous, transformation of character. Freeing yourself from the addiction to that form of self-medication. And so you see it when you practice contemplation, concentration, and meditation. You see clearly those things that are that you're using because they continue to interrupt you and say, no, instead of doing this, do what you've always done. In one way or another, some thoughts like that will come to your mind as you're practicing concentration. Your left mind will tell you, oh, this isn't working. You need to do what you've always done. And food, the thought of food still is an interruption. In the beginning stages of concentration, that the thought of food will come. And I just think, oh, well, now I just think that's just the food body doing its routine. I don't need to pay any attention to it. So I don't pay any attention to it. I just say that's what happens. And so I just go on with my concentration, and pretty soon it's forgotten about. And something else is there in the awareness.
Thank you, Brother Shankar.
Sure. Anything else from anyone?
Shankaraji,
Yes, dear.
it reminds me only last Tuesday, we were reading the Holy Mother's book.
Mm-hmm.
And the mother clearly says that how dare anything can happen to my devotees with the karma. Just think about the Sri Ramakrishna.
Right.
And the other thing is, on many occasions, she said, instead of, if the karma is there, instead of losing a limb, you might end up with a scratch.
Yes. Well, so instead of losing my life, I had open heart surgery. But it easily could have killed me. Yes, so it was more than a scratch, but then that was what was required. And that, of course, too, was instructive to the whole body-mind complex. Anything else from anyone?
I recently read a book by Dr. Brian Weiss, One Soul, Many Bodies. And Dr. Weiss takes people into past life regressions to help treat them for challenges they're facing in this life. And he said that people who struggle with overeating often had faced starvation in a previous life.
That's doubtless true. There's probably something very much to that. Or even if it wasn't just the immediately previous life, a recent life. We are eons old. This is what Vivekananda tells us. Each one of you, as a breathing being, as a jiva, you are made of the impressions gathered over eons in many, many different forms, in many, many different circumstances that are completely beyond our imagination. But nevertheless, that is, according to Vivekananda, and for that matter, the findings of modern physics. This universe is 13.7 billion years old. That of which we are made, the stardust of which we are made, is billions of years old. And so we have been forming some sort of form out of that stardust as soon as it was available to us. That's what the divine presence does, is create. So thank you, Brahmadas.
Brother, but if we continuously remind ourselves, like, we have all these samskaras within us, but if we continuously remind ourselves, I am the soul, I'm not this, all this is just let it go, let it go. And even if we don't, let's say in this, if a person does this throughout their lifetime, but they don't achieve the final goal, what's going to happen with them?
Well, Sri Krishna is very explicit about this. Arjuna asks the question. Arjuna says, well, what happens if I've been pursuing the goal of yoga and my prarabdha karma ends and my body ends before I achieve the goal? Won't I be lost in this life, lost in the next? And he even uses a very, very poetic image. Won't I be like a cloud broken off from the main body of the cloud? In other words, completely separate from that which has been sustaining it. And Sri Krishna says, and it's one of the few places in the Gita in which he addresses Arjuna in this way. He says, know my son, know my son. That's not how it works. No effort is ever lost. If indeed your life comes to an end before you reach the goal, you will take a new body in auspicious circumstances that allows you to move on and continue that quest. And he says, it will be auspicious circumstances. The best, of course, would be to be born to illumined souls. He says that's very rare. You will be born, if it's more auspicious, to pious and prosperous parents. But even if that isn't the case, what you will be born to is auspicious parents, parents who will treat you in such a way that helps you to overcome the lacks, the whatever it was that was preventing you from making progress. So no, and again, so that we see that many forms of knowledge support this. The findings of physics are that no energy is ever lost. It is only transformed. And so exactly what Krishna says is supported by the findings of physics as well. And there's no reason to think that Krishna needs any support. It's just interesting that these various forms of knowledge all point in the same direction. And Vivekananda, in his talks on Jnana Yoga, uses the findings of physics of his day. Very much he refers to them to help support what he's saying. So thank you, Rajiv. No, it will not be lost. There is no time limit for you. This is not a meritocracy. It's not a timed test. Thank you, Rajiv. Anything else from anyone?
Yes, Brother Shankara, this is Jeff.
Yes, Jeff.
I have been dealing with the decision of choosing an Ishta Devata or whether or not to choose one. And I'm starting to see the advantage of having one when there's the opportunity for your Ishtam to come alive, as the Swami has described.
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, the fact is that your Ishta Devata already exists within you. It only remains for you to discover that form of the divine, or that formless aspect of the divine that appeals to your heart. It will probably be some formed aspect of the divine. So just allow yourself to know your heart. It won't be easy to put into words what your feelings are. It may not be very specific in the beginning, but just allow yourself to feel of what it is. And sometimes we get a sense of it by what is it we love in the outside world. And then what is an analog for that? Why do we love that? As Yajnavalkya says in the Brihadranyaka, the Big Forest Upanishad, he says, it is only for the sake of the self, the divine presence, that we love anything. So just let your mind rest on what it is that you love and how might that reflect itself within your heart. There's that story of the farmer and the goat. You've heard me tell it. The man could find no Ishtadevata in his heart. He could find no form or formless aspect of the divine that appealed to him. And so Sri Ramakrishna said, what do you love? And the man says, well, I love my goat. He'd raised it from a baby, and he really loved his goat. And Sri Ramakrishna said, very well, worship your goat. The man came back in 3 years, tears streaming down his face, because he now, that's what happens sometimes to particularly the more emotional of us when we come to the knowledge of the truth. Tears streamed down our face. Tears were streaming down his face, and he said to Sri Ramakrishna simply, now I understand. Because he had discovered the self in that goat. He had discovered the self in his own heart, and that's why he loved the goat. So, and don't feel like you need to be in any hurry about it, Jeff. Just let your mind rest on your heart and what you love. What do you love in the outside world? You don't need to tell me, and if you want to talk to me about it, let's talk about it privately. But it's yes. So just that.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Anything else from anyone?
There was another inspiring verse in the Gita. Could you remind me? It was something to the effect of, even though a man be the worst of sinners, if he comes to me, I see no sinner.
Oh, yes. And Krishna doesn't even bother to say that he's the worst of sinners. He just says, turn to me in utter devotion. In other words, come to an understanding of who I am and why I deserve your love and devotion. Come to an understanding of that and turn to me. And you can do this in the beginning because you've heard it's true. You don't need to have a full understanding. But once you turn in that direction and you begin to cultivate that idea and that feeling within yourself, then you come to understand. So he says, turn to me in utter devotion. I see no sinner. And then what does he say? The exact parallel to what we just heard. And I'm glad you brought this up because it is an exact parallel to what the Swami just said about the magnet will begin to draw you. It is what Krishna says, turn to me in utter devotion. I see no sinner. Holiness itself shall transform you. In other words, once you turn in this direction and you maintain that focus and that intention and that priority, then things begin to take their own course. So yes, it is a very, very potent verse, and I'm really glad you brought it up, because what Krishna says is exactly parallel to what this Swami just said. He says that magnet, first it seems like you're generating the power, then you begin to sense, no, something is drawing. Grace, the divine being. Thank you, Brahmadas. Somebody else wanted to speak at the same time, Brahmadas.
I just wanted to say we read few pages back about a metaphor Swami gives, like for example, like Sri Ramakrishna about the goat. This gentleman doesn't know whom he loves, and he said he loves his buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
And the Swami says, okay, just pray on that buffalo. After a couple of years later, he comes back and he knocks on the door. And the gentleman says, the horns are so big, I cannot come through the door.
Right. Because his identification.
That's exactly. So that transformation.
And so now, and what does the Swami then tell him? What does his guru then tell him?
Yes, okay,
Now
continue.
turn
This is
that attention toward God,
yes.
and your transformation will be complete. Yes, the mind is a tricky place. We have to insist on things in the beginning. We have to insist to our mind. No, we're going to do it this way. I know you think you know better. I know you've coped very successfully. And so deal with your mind lovingly. It's not your enemy. It'll become your enemy if you treat it like one. But if you don't treat it like an enemy, if you say lovingly to your mind, I understand. But no, I've come to realize something else. And the idea is embodied in the word realize. I've come to realize, and realization is something of the heart. And so then you have to persuade the mind, we're going to do it this way because of my realization. You see, this is exactly what a class is about. I'm so glad we do this, because the Swami can say all these things and we can read them in a book, and we can get something out of it when we read them in a book. But how much more when each of us who feels so moved is contributing and asking questions, and we hear from one another. We really begin to have a way of understanding it. The energy flows among us. Anything?
Yes, I think so. I think when we read it aloud and discuss it together, it helps it sink in and looking at
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
It keeps the mind from wandering off.
Yes.
It can happen when you're just reading by yourself.
Oh, Lord, yes. Because we get triggered by some particular thing we read, and we'll find that 5 minutes have gone by and we haven't been reading at all. We've been thinking about something. It may be good, it may not, but certainly it isn't leading us to one pointed focus. Shall we read on a bit? Well, it's just a few minutes before the hour.
And also that finishes that 49.
Well, the right reaction between power and conduct, wrote. This, he says, transformation of character. The right reaction.
Relation.
It says relation.
The right relation, sorry. The right relation between prayer and conduct, wrote Archbishop Temple, is not that conduct is supremely important and prayer may help it, but that prayer is supremely important, and conduct.
That's it.
Conduct, what is it? Conduct.
Yes.
Conduct
Yes.
tests. Conduct tests it. Prayer is supremely important, and conduct tests it. And if this is true in the preliminary phase of spiritual life, it should be even more strikingly demonstrated in the final unitive state of samadhi. In achieving that, a man becomes a saint, or as Patanjali says, and then he goes on to the next. And I'll just read that, and then we'll take it up next time. So, in achieving that unitive state of samadhi, a man becomes a saint. For, as Patanjali says, the impression which is made upon the mind by that samadhi wipes out all other past impressions. And that's what we'll discuss next week. It wipes them out, that savikalpa or nirvichara samadhi. It wipes out all the other impressions in the sense that it puts them in their place. It isn't as if they simply disappear. Your universe has not yet disappeared. It has been transformed. So anything else from anyone? All right, just again a moment's a moment's thought about John Kasich and the fact that he left us on the morning of September the 8th, and another early participant in, he's one of the names that I mentioned earlier about who helped this place get going in the beginning. And then John Kasich helped sustain education and finally established it. But one of the Swamis that came was a Swami Atmavratananda. Atmavratananda, Ananta Maharaj. Swami Atmavratananda ultimately left the Ramakrishna order because he became attached to something called the Sharada Ramakrishna Vivekananda Society in upstate New York. And he became the head of that society there. He's now very seriously ill. And it's a concern whether he will. So these early leaders of what is now the congregation that you're part of are aging and are either passing from us, as Tom Couch did, as John Kasich just did, and whether Swami Bruce, as he is called, Ananta Maharaj, whether he will make it is not clear. So just hold a good thought for all of these great souls. They spent their life in service to others. John Kasich went on and spent his life in service to others in a different way, but very, very, very usefully to them. You'll hear in the bulletin a couple of recollections from people that served as a counselor and therapist. So any final thought from anyone? All right, dears. Om Hari Om. Om Asato Ma Satkamaya. Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya. Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Abir Moiti. O dearly beloved, lead us from this realm of relentless confusion to thine abode of silence, serenity, clarity, and peace. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of thy wisdom and love. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of thy wisdom and love. Lead us from death to immortality. Light us through with thy everlasting, shining presence. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace. Peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ki Jai. Durga, Durga, Durga. May we be safe. May we be healthy. May we be cheerful. May we have peace of mind. And may we be always in the loving and protective embrace of the Divine Being as our Mother and Father. Om Hari Om Tat Sat. Beloved, make it so. So until next time, dears, tomorrow morning, there's a change in plan. It has to do with all these things that have happened in the last 10 days. Tom Couch leaving, John Kasich leaving. I will not be speaking tomorrow morning. You will, and I hope you join us to hear a truly remarkable Theravadan Buddhist priest. He's an ordained priest of the Theravadan Buddhist tradition. His name is Gareth Young. Some of you have heard from him before. He, like so many Buddhists, he moved from the small boat, the Zen aspect of Buddhism. Because of its limitations, he found them too confining, and so moved from that to the big boat, or Mahayana, uh, Theravadan, which is a Thai form of Buddhism, and studied long enough and well enough to become an ordained priest in September of last year, almost a year ago now. And so I can only tell you that he's well worth listening to. I have breakfast with him about once a month, and he is one of my dearest friends, and really a deep and because of his background, because of who he has this very lighthearted and humorous way of being in the world and in talking. So it's a joy to be with him. So I hope tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock, you'll join us on Zoom to hear Gareth Young speak. And he's sending me his topic. It'll be in the bulletin and on the website and on the Facebook page later today. So any final thought from any of you?
Shankaraji,
Yes, dear.
is he going to come to the center and talk, or is he from his own way, from his own center, he's going to be on Zoom?
He's going to be from his home.
Okay.
No, he's not going to come. We're not having any in-person gatherings here. I mean, right now, Shailesh is sitting here with me because he's come for Seva Saturday. But other than that, we're not having any in-person gatherings. So he'll speak from his home. He has a shrine at his home. I have no idea what the background will be behind him, but you can bet it will be appropriate. He is, Gareth is, but if you'd like to join us for breakfast on the 14th, Bala, just give me a note and you can join us for breakfast.
Okay, Shankaraji, thank you.
So, Jai, 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 the divine presence. Jai, 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 that divine presence in each and every one of us, which is one divine presence. And it appears magically through the power of Shakti or Maya. It appears as these 12 of us who are on the screen. What an amazing thing. But we come together in this way to share one another in joy and love and in growth. So may you be well and in bright spirits. Until next time, any final thought from anyone? All right, dears, here we go. As Jackie Gleason used to say, and away we go.